Hey everybody, Alan Feirer here of Group Dynamic, along with Dr. Lucas Petersen of Purdue University. If you're watching this on purpose, it's probably because you are attending the virtual fourth follow-up session from your 2024 Group Dynamic Youth Leadership Workshop. If you're like, I don't know what any of that stuff is, that's okay, because we're going to talk about score study, and that applies to anybody, even if you did not attend that workshop. So, let's jump right in because, again, if you're here for the right reason, you know exactly who we are and why we're here. But first, why do score study? When I was a director, every once in a while, my approach to score study was listen to a good recording, and then if it didn't sound like the recording, do stuff in rehearsal to make it sound more like the recording. Should I have studied my scores just a little bit more than that, Dr. Pierce? Why?
Uh, Maybe. Why score study? And bottom line is this is important, right? It's the part of the job that makes our job very different from other jobs. It is an artistic synthesis of all of our learned skills and information, right? And the more you prioritize it and do it, the more fulfilled you will be as a musician, and your ensembles will sound better, which sounds to me like a win-win, right? 100% or your money back.
Okay, whoa, that's quite the promise.
I know, that's a guarantee.
Truth is, I did a certain amount of score study, and because I remember I went to a session once. I can't remember who the professor was. It might have been Tom Dvorak from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, who said, no, it was Paula Holcomb. Paula Holcomb said,
Hmm.
if you just spend 60 seconds on score study, you can still get something done. And that was exactly what short attention span Alan needed to hear. And a lot of it had to do with some of the nuts and bolts of just like marking the score and preparing the score. So give us the low hanging fruit first, Lucas. What are some things we should mark right away?
So there, and you just touched on the two things I'd like to start with, and that there's score study and there's preparing a score, right? Preparing a score is the nuts and bolts, entrances, cues, tempi, dynamics, all of the things, right? And then preparing a score is also thinking about your rehearsal and how to teach it,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's preparing a score.
Yeah.
Score study is when you develop your own personal aural image, right? Your informed musical opinion. And it's answering the question, how do you, the conductor, how do you want it to sound, right? And score study is always thinking about the music, right? You're answering the questions, what is the form, microphrase, macrophrase, where's the line going? How do you want that chord to sound? How do those staccato sound? What kind of sound do I want from suspended cymbal, triangle? What mallets are they going to use? What colors are coming in and out of the textures, quality and function of the chord? Like you're answering all of those questions. How do you want them to sound? And can you hear it in your head? Right? And that's called audiating the score. Can you look at the score and hear it in your internal ear?
Am I allowed to prepare
And
the score first, though? I mean, is that like I just kind of thought it went good in that order. Do you find that it's good to do it in that order, or do you want to challenge people to get their oral image going on first before marking in entrances and stuff like that?
so so for me, and we'll go through my steps here in a bit. Like marking the score is the very first step of what I consider to be the microphrasal analysis, right? And for me, the markings that I'm making while preparing a score are less to remind me to cue the trombones here at measure 33, right? It's not for me, it's not that. For me, it's easier to draw my eye if I see a big trombone, tenor saxophone, bass clarinet in the middle of the page. To me, it's telling me those are the colors that I need to be hearing in my head while I'm studying. So I don't always have to look toward at the beginning of the page,
Yeah.
so for me, the markings are just reinforcing my own aural image, right? And it's not a reminder for me to tell them to crescendo right here or something like that. Does that make sense?
It does. Yep.
Yeah,
The reason I'm kind of stalling on that, or like lingering on that just a little bit, is I really do think that I had a pretty successful career, but I did stall out a little bit beyond doing too much of that actual preparation. And so I just kind of wanted to lift up the fact that if you do just a bit more, there's like a whole other level. So keep talking about that other level.
Right. And so, in a perfect world, all of this is done well in advance of the rehearsal planning stage, right? So that by the first rehearsal, your aural image is developed and you can start to have that conversation with the ensemble of this is the sound that I'm getting from them, and it's not matching what I have in here. And so then you're going about, fixing that, right?
Mhm.
And so developing that aural image, just like anything we do, what method do you use to do that, right? And you mentioned recordings, so let's talk about recordings just a little bit. If you're having trouble hearing a particular part of the score in your head, find a recording. Nothing naughty, bad, or wrong about that, in my opinion, right? You get called into sub for a rehearsal real quick, and you need to learn something like within the span of half an hour or an hour, find a recording, right? Fantastic use of that. If you want to actually ingest the score and develop your own personal informed aural image on how the music should sound, don't use a recording, and so back in the day, that was a full stop. Don't use recordings. But back in the day, there were, only a handful of, maybe not even half a handful of recordings available of certain pieces. So the only aural images you're getting of certain works are from those couple people, and they might have very different musical opinions than you, right? These days, with all the resources we have available to us, finding multiple recordings is a lot easier. And I think if you use them correctly to, like I said, hear a difficult part of the score, or you need you need to brush up on something for a rehearsal that you're subbing in for, a performance you're subbing in for, use a recording. Like it's just the way it has to be right now.
So are there more sophisticated ways to generate my oral image than a recording?
Yeah, so there was a book. I can't remember the title of the book or who wrote it, but it's there was a section in there, and it was called "Taking 7 Trips Through the Score,"
Hmm.
right? And that was to start your study process, and that's looking at instrumentation, transpositions, form analysis, the harmonic structure, melodic line and instrumentation, phrasal analysis, dynamics and articulation, and then a special effects in the score and the manner of execution on the instruments. Okay, 7 trips through the score, and then you know it perfectly. For me, it didn't quite work that way. I tried that method, and I found it just a little bit lacking. And so, over, uh, yeah, there you go. Over many pieces and many trips through scores and trial and error, I've kind of come up with my own process and my own method of developing an aural image, right? And oh, that's very helpful right there.
Um,
So
a
for me,
professional.
yeah, there you go. So for me, and this goes back to my very first conducting class I had at the University of Iowa, and numbering the measures seems like a very small thing to do, but for me, it's a very like this is the start. It's like it's like writing your name at the top of an exam or something. It's the start of the activity, and so no matter what, my numbers they have to be at the top. If they're already numbered, that's great. I still just kind of pretend and loosely leaf through. I'm just getting a little acquainted with the music by numbering the measures, right? And then the very next thing is a quick historical background into the composer and piece, right? And this isn't like it's not supposed to be like time consuming and prohibitive like some of the assignments you had in your conducting classes might have been, right? We're talking a quick windrep.org or Wikipedia,
Mhm.
and just knowing where and with whom the composer studied. Is the piece a transcription? Is it an arrangement? Is it find the source material, right? If it's based on a choral piece, what's the text? just kind of just doing an overall background of the piece and the composer, thinking about where the piece falls in the composer's history. Is it an early Tekeli or is it a late Tekeli? Because I think that makes a big difference on how much work you're going to have to do to pull the music out. Because they get better with age, composers do.
Sure.
Um, much like us conductors, and I should say most of
Right.
them get better with age.
No, no,
Um,
like we ought to be doing something better 10 years from now than we did it 10 years ago. And yeah, that makes sense. And I would think that as your career goes on, you'll repeat composers. You'll have some favorites, or there's some good ones you want to play again and again. I think there's not a lot of people who do Philip Spark who only did Philip Spark exactly one time, or who only do a Holst one time. So they'll get easier over time, right?
right. Oh, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. And so for me, the next thing is just looking at instrumentation and transpositions. Is there anything weird? If you're doing something written in the last, 30, 40 years, chances are there's really nothing that weird in there. But just to make sure you have all the mutes that you need, any percussion equipment, if there's any like alto clarinet parts that aren't covered elsewhere, that you need to make sure uh, that you maybe write out a part, because nobody wants to hear it on an alto clarinet. Just kidding. Little humor there. Um, and an important part of that process for me is checking the split parts, especially at big cadential points, because if within the flute one part it splits off into three, but the everybody wants to play the high note, but the high note's actually the sharp fourth of the chord, and you don't want so you just being aware of those splits and making sure you know how you're going to do that with your ensemble. And then for me, the next big thing, and I think the most important thing is determining the overall form and the macro analysis, the big picture of the entire piece, right? And for me, this is how I determine what you see there, the chunks or the microstructures, which will guide your study down the road a little bit. And again, you don't have to. It's not so formal that you have to script out everything and write it down and write a report about it like we did in our conducting classes. But you should know if it's binary, ABA, is it sonata form, through composed, and essentially you're just determining unifying musical elements because getting a true ABA these days, it doesn't always work, but you're determining unifying musical elements throughout the piece, right? And getting a harmonic big picture and a dynamic big picture. What are the major tonal centers? And where is for I call it just the gold star moment of the piece, where that is the clear climax or the high point of the piece. It's not always going to be where you think it is. It could be in the beginning, middle, end, but you have to determine that because everything that happens before and after that is in service to that one particular moment, right? If that's what you, through your various and numerous hours of study, have determined is it, everything before and after cannot be that, right? So, and that's a very thing to establish early on because it's gonna guide your own development of the oral image.
If you've just come out of marching band season, you can use the vocabulary of general effect, GE, hit. Where's the hit? Um,
Yeah, that's it.
oh, but let's stay fancy. Sorry, keep going.
Oh, he can stay fancy. And then so you've determined your big picture, right? You know that it's through composed, the A sections, 43 measures, B sections, 27, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Next step is what I call a microphrasal analysis, and that's you're determining the different parts happening during that one specific phrase, right? And so, say the A section is, I don't know, 18 measures, right? And you can see based off of either harmonic structure, a melodic line, rhythmic structures, uh, measure changes, or not measure change, meter changes or whatever, you can determine that those 18 measures can be broken up into, say, six, six, and then four and two, right? And then you go back to this to that first six section, and looking at all of those things that are listed there, right? The structure, harmonic structure, chord voicings, lines and colors, and you're answering the question for letter H. How do you want that to sound for that six measures? And you start this, and you do that for every section of the piece, right? The A section, B, C, D, et cetera, until you have a fully formed opinion on how you want each small section to sound. And then we enter the next phase, which I call micro reading.
Let's
And
just
you're literally,
sorry, stand by.
yeah,
Let me talk about the microphrasal analysis again.
okay.
Um, as you do this, do you stick with that spot for a while? Like, you know what? For the next half hour, all I'm going to do is think about these 16 bars or these 32 bars.
Yep. Until you can look at it and you can hear it in your head, you should stick with it however long that takes. And that'll be different for everybody, depending on, how quickly you ingest a score, difficulty of music, et cetera, et cetera. But just like you would practice anything on your own individual instrument, you stick with it until you can hear it in your head.
And just in case your eyes are glazing over as a observer here, you know what occurs to me is your general advice and advice that I also give, which is start slowly or start a bit at a time. You know, if you're like I was most of my career, just preparing rather than doing too much studying. um, don't do this with every piece in your folder, or even if doing this with one piece is intimidating, do this with the A section of one piece and see how fulfilling it is. And then pretty soon, I don't just think people will be motivated to then do that whole piece and then start to make it more of a habit.
And this is where the money back guarantee comes in, because I guarantee you, if you were to devote the time and commit to doing this, to, like you said, the A section of a piece, and prepare it, fully and wholly, uh, your next rehearsal of that section, you're going to come away feeling better, more fulfilled, and it's just you're just going to feel a lot better about the work that you did,
Yeah.
um, because you're so prepared, and you can convincingly, give that information to your students. And I even had a former student who was a little overwhelmed with this process, and so I challenged him. I said, do exactly what you just said. Like, spend 2 hours on these thirty measures of music,
Yeah.
right? And really get it in your head. And I asked him how it went. He said it was incredible. Like,
Anytime I've
it
done that
was,
with a piece, I've like fallen even more in love with it. So I think there's that too, you know.
yeah.
All
And
right.
so,
Yeah, go on.
um, the next phase for me is just the micro reading, right? You've developed your oral image. You know how it's supposed to sound. And like it says there, much like an etude on your instrument, I start reading with a metronome. And if it's at a quicker tempo, I'm never reading at a performance tempo. And when I say reading, I mean literally like a book. Like, you start and then you go through the microphrase, this 18 measures or whatever, six measures, whatever you're looking on. You start and you go through and you do it again and again and again, and you try to hear everything, or until you can hear everything clearly.
And
Determine
you're
a bass
audiating.
tempo.
Sorry to just,
Well,
but like you're audiating. You're not just looking at it,
yeah,
you're audiating, right?
and it's important to not sing, don't sing the parts, but you're audiating, like you said, in your head. You're hearing it in your head, because a lot of conducting teachers or lessons, they might have asked you to sing. My own opinion and my own philosophy is, if you're singing the parts, you're not you're not hearing it in your head, right? And when you're and when you're actually conducting it, the stuff you have in your head is going to be kind of tainted by your own voice that has been singing that. So instead of singing, if you're having trouble hearing the voicing of a chord or hearing a melody, plunk it out on a piano, play it on your instrument, just to get the line in your head, but then try to hear the colors of the instruments that are playing that chord or that line in your head, and try to avoid singing if you can.
All right. More about the tempo?
Yeah, I mean, just like on your instrument, determining a bass tempo that allows you to hear everything that's happening, all of those musical elements you see there on the page. And then, like you practice your instrument, you read through it at that tempo a couple times, then up it to two clits until you reach performance tempo, right? And then we enter the final phase, which is macro reading, and that's just that you have it in your head, and you're literally just playing the score in your head, um, when you're studying and flipping it through, and you continuing to ingest it and develop your oral image.
Cool. All right. So now tell us when we're supposed to do this because this sounds really time consuming. So, help us out.
Yeah, and so for me, like it says there, stages 4 and 5, until you're comfortable reading at a performance tempo. They have to be done in a quiet place with little to no distraction. Um, Tongue-in-cheekly says, well lit, comfortable, caffeinated with a nice Malbec, right? Any of the other stages, if you're just putting in some markings, it can be done anywhere, right?
Mhm.
Um, for how long? Stages 4, 5, and 6 need a good chunk of time, right? Everything else can kind of be piecemealed when you get the chance. Again, in a perfect world, all of this is done before the first rehearsal, right? And then so the big question: when can you score study, right? Um, you and I were both high school band directors for a number of years, and we know that time is in, incredibly valuable. And not only were we high school band directors, we were in relationships. You were a parent. Um, I am now a a dog parent, and
Well,
while I realize this is not as much time or energy as an actual human, it still is time out of the day, and it's time well spent, right? Because we love them. So when do we find time to study? And there is no easy answer. But going back um, to the very first thing that we said, why score study? That this is important, right? It's the job, part of the job that makes our job just much different than the average job, right? And conducting and score study is unless we're actively performing and gigging musicians on our instruments, it's really our musical outlet it's really the only one that we get is the conducting part of the job. And so the more you prioritize it and do it, the more fulfilled you're going to be, right?
and if everybody's followed our pointers from the last session, from session three, everybody's got a bunch of extra time because their student leaders are taking care of other stuff because they can't do this.
Right. So if you are short on time, a few hot takes. The first and the most easiest kind of blanket answer, just wake up a little earlier, right? There's the book Switch: How to Change When Change is Hard, talks about your rider, your brain, the elephant, which is your emotions, and the path, which is just the everyday obstacles that keep us from doing the things we know we need to do, like go to the gym, floss more, et cetera, et cetera. Your rider, you know you would be a better teacher, and your bands would sound better if you could find some more time to study. So. You have to motivate your elephant, your emotions, and you have to structure the path in a way that makes it easier to do that. Like finding time during your school day, doing only what you can do,
Mhm.
so that you can pick up those spare 10, 15 minutes to get into your score a little bit. And like you said, was it Paula Holcomb, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you only have 60 seconds to look at your score for 60 seconds, right? You're gonna find something. You're gonna be 60 seconds better, right? In my doctoral program, I was bemoaning to Dr. Popeil that with all of my graduate duties, I just didn't have time to get ahead in the score. Um, and he said, I know, I get it. And he's like, but I'll tell you what my teacher told me is just have it out on the kitchen table.
Mm.
If you're walking by and you have a spare 5, 10 minutes, sit down and look at it. Just have it out and available everywhere you go. And if you have 5, 10 minutes, if that's all you have, just use it, right? Instead of I hate I hate to knock on it, right? But instead of looking at the Facebook for 5, 10 minutes, take your scores into the bathroom, right?
This is why you never comment on my Facebook posts. Okay, you're studying this.
No, but actually, there's a wonderful app now called Fourscore that if you it's very easy to upload a PDF to take pictures of your score, fully marked or mark it in the app. It's a one-time cost. I think I'm not sponsored, but it's a one-time cost of like 19 bucks or something. I have all of my scores on my phone, right? And so if you don't want to lug around 8 concert scores, put them on your phone or in a tablet or on your laptop, and then they're always with you.
Mhm.
Um, and if you have 10 minutes while you're waiting for a meeting to start, just flip through it, right?
Yeah.
And then some other quick things is planning your repertoire for the year as best as you can, right? And that's kind of a hot topic with a lot of individuals. But I'm firmly of the opinion that unless you're in year 1 or 2 at a school, you pretty much know if you know your students, if you've built the relationships and you know them, you pretty much know what they can do, right? Or know what they should be able to do given some guidance, right? So even if you can only plan the big pieces for each cycle, like the one that the meat, I guess, plan those in advance and get your head into them in the summertime so that, when it's now November and you're trying to get ready for jazz band and the musical and your concert bands and Allstate and everything else going on, you have the 8 or 9 minutes of the concert, however long that big piece is already in your head,
Yeah.
and it's just less you have to do during the actual school year, right? You know how important it is, you know how busy you are, so making it a priority in the summer is very helpful, right? Not trying all new repertoire every single year. Again, if you're a first, second, third, fifth year teacher, it's a little challenging, right? Because every score almost is going to be new. But if you're established enough to start repeating some repertoire that you found to be of quality, do that because refamiliarizing yourself with the score takes a lot less time than learning one from scratch. Um, and then, like I said, once you've done all of the legwork and can read through and hear everything, um, just live with your scores, throw it on your phone, read it during breakfast, lunch, break time, bathroom, you know, the shower, whatever you have to do to get the score into your head.
Remind me, what's the guarantee again?
100% guarantee,
100%
or
money
you
back guarantee.
money back. Yeah, that's it.
All the money that you spent for this session. Ah, beautiful. Well, if you've got questions, LH Peters at purdue.edu or Alan at groupdynamic.net. If you have watched this because you got the link in an email from Dr. Petersen, because you're an actual part of our follow-up program for the Group Dynamic Youth Leadership Workshops, you got an attachment with all those notes that you saw when we shared the screen. If you're not a part of that, if you email Dr. Petersen, I'm totally sure he would send it to you, even if you weren't like an official part of this program. We just want band programs to get better. And Lucas is kind of good at helping programs do that. So it is our pleasure to bring this to you. Okay, session number 5, the next one that will drop in a week or two. What's the topic for that one?
I believe that one's going to be on rehearsal philosophy and management,
Oh, that is
and
abs.
also maybe some conducting and some movement activities as well.
I'll play ball. I'll play ball in that. I am passionate about, as you know, I am passionate about rehearsal psychology, not necessarily philosophy, but rehearsal psychology and pacing and mapping out. One of my favorite topics. So we'll see you all in a week or two when we drop session 5. Thanks for joining us.